Okay. Hi, guys. Thanks for making it out in the snow. As you can see, there is no recruiter here with me today. She was stuck at home due to the weather. So she did send me some content that she wanted me to add and present. So you will be getting her perspective just through the slides instead. And I might have mentioned this before, but I was a recruiter at one point as well. So you'll get a little bit of that perspective. But just a reminder, your video mock interviews are due tomorrow. I had some flyers up front here. If you're interested in the Job Shadow program, let me know. It's a one-day experience over winter break where you get to go shadow someone, network with a company. Most of them take place in Denver or in the state of Colorado. So if you're interested in that at all, Angie Jimenez is the contact for that. So let's put away technology. We won't need it really for this class session. And today we're going to talk about navigating the recruiting process. So I know that the recruiting process is kind of a mystery to a lot of people if you haven't gone through it, and kind of what each of the steps are, how best to navigate it, what are the do's and don'ts. So we're going to cover some of that today, and I'm going to avoid being redundant with things that we've already talked about in class before. All right, so before we get into that recruiting part, I want to talk a little bit about gravity problems. So gravity problems are things that you feel like you can solve, but really you can't have too much influence on. So things like gravity. We want to be able to jump really high. Well, we want to solve the problem of gravity. You can't really do that. Gravity's there unless you have like a rocket ship or something, right? So it can lead to us wasting time trying to solve a problem that's not solvable. So some examples of this. I want to live in the mountains, but I prefer not to live where it snows. That's kind of a gravity problem. You can't really fix that. I want to play in the NBA, but I'm only 5 feet tall. Possible, you might be able to do it, but there's like that 99% chance that it's not solvable. This one's a personal example. I want to be an astronaut, but I hate rides and I'm scared of heights. So growing up when I was a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and then I realized I hate roller coasters. I hate taking classes related to math. I am afraid of heights. That's probably not a good career path for me. I can't really solve the fact that being an astronaut would include heights. So instead of trying to solve these problems, we want to try to reframe them or think about them in a slightly different way, in a way that can be solvable. All right, so this is all stuff from Designing Your Life. I keep going back to a little bit of that book, so you'll start to hear some of these terms a little bit more frequently on campus. All right, what is your gravity problem? So I would love you all to think about a problem you have. It can be related to the job and internship search. It doesn't have to be. It could be related to school. It doesn't have to be. But a problem in your life that you feel like you've been trying to solve, and you're just not ever getting anywhere, and you're super frustrated by it. So think of that kind of problem, and then I want you to partner up. You'll describe your situation, you'll describe your problem, partner one will, and partner two at that time will ask some questions. So trying to kind of get at the underlying feelings about the problem, just continuing to ask open-ended questions, okay? And partner two, try not to kind of interject opinions as we go. Try to just get as much information as you can up front with those questions. And then we'll switch and repeat and see if you can help each other figure out a way to reframe that gravity problem. All right, so pair up and go ahead and do that. You can work in groups of 2 or 3 or whatever's comfortable for you all, but go ahead and pair up and work on this activity, and then we'll bring it all back in. I'll let you know when it's time to switch partners to make sure everyone gets a chance. I'll put on some music in the background for you. Okay, let's bring it back in. So I'm going to ask who would want to volunteer. If no one volunteers, I'll just pick on people. So if you did the activity and you got something out of it, I'd love for you to share what you guys talked about. I heard some good conversations, so I know some of you were doing it. Anyone? Do you guys want to share up here? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So her kind of problem was sort of solvable, but I think thinking of it in another way. So she currently works for the men's lacrosse team, wants to work in sports eventually. So a lot of students come to me and they say, I really want to work in sports entertainment marketing or sports management or something along those lines. And they say, but the opportunities are few and far between, and it's really hard to get a job, and I've applied 5 times to work for the Broncos, and I can't get an internship with them. But if you get some experience on your resume, so maybe on-campus experience, or even just shadowing or volunteering, that can make that process a little bit easier. So that's a great example of a way you can reframe that gravity problem and say, okay, so it's really hard to just get in by applying through resumes only, but if I do some stuff on campus, that might help me a little bit. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Okay. So moving on. Gravity problems in recruiting. So some examples that I hear from students quite frequently. Online applications take a long time and can be redundant and stressful. I totally agree. They take forever, some of them. You have to re-put your resume in, and you're like, I just uploaded it. Why do I have to retype everything and tell you my work experience and my education? It's on my resume. It's frustrating. So that's kind of a gravity problem that we can't really solve because you have to do it. My dream company doesn't come to campus to recruit. That's a gravity problem that I hear pretty frequently too, because it's hard for you as a student to change that and go out and get a company to come to campus and recruit here. I want to work at or in a certain company or industry that isn't really in Denver, and then I want to stay in Denver. Okay, we hear that a lot. Like, I want to be an investment banker. Yes, that is possible here, but much more likely if you go to New York, for example. The company I want to work for doesn't sponsor international students. That's one that we hear pretty frequently, and it's a huge problem, and don't always agree with companies' reasoning behind that, but some companies just won't do it. So that's a gravity problem that's really hard to fix too for those students. The jobs I'm being offered won't pay my bills. So your student loans, your car payment, rent, things that kind of pile up. I want to earn X amount of money in my field of interest, but those jobs in Denver don't pay in that range. How do I solve that? Kind of hard to solve that. I don't do well in video interviews, so I need to find a way to avoid them. That's probably not really a thing either. If you're looking at a company or looking at an industry that uses video interviews, you're probably going to have to do one in order to get through their hiring process. Okay, so ideas for how to reframe some of these questions. So for the online application one, how can I plan time in my day to complete the lengthy online application so they're not so stressful? So I'm not scrambling to complete it, that I actually have the time set aside. How can I find some networking contacts at my dream company to be noticed and considered for a position? They're not going to come to campus. It's not going to be as easy as going to career fair and meeting them there. So how do I go out and make that contact myself? How far from Denver am I willing to move? Am I willing to work in a slightly different industry or company to stay in Denver? Maybe a smaller bank and stay in Denver. Or maybe I work in a slightly different area in finance instead of investment banking and stay in Denver. What are some similar companies that historically sponsor international students? So maybe that dream company won't sponsor an international student, but there's plenty of other companies out there that will, and we can help you figure out, okay, what companies historically have hired international students, so you can apply for those ones and talk to them. How can I determine what jobs and internships to apply for in order to pay for my ideal lifestyle? So if you have a number that you want to hit, a certain salary number that you want to hit, doing some research, figuring out what companies pay that, what jobs pay that, where do I need to be to actually have that higher salary? So there's different ways to think about these problems. And so whenever you're running into a problem that you're like, oh, I want to solve this problem, I'm trying over and over and beating my head against the wall, maybe you're just looking at it in a slightly negative way, or a way that's not solvable. So reframing can really help with that. All right, so diving into recruiting, what does a recruiter do? Have any of you interacted with recruiters on campus yet, or in hiring process? Sort of? Okay, good. So if you haven't, recruiters, their job is to understand a company's recruitment needs, identify talented candidates to fill open positions, coordinate the interview process, follow up with candidates, so make sure all of that behind the scenes stuff is working, and then represent the organization at recruiting events. So their job is not necessarily to hire you. They're kind of that first line of defense that you would be interviewing with or meeting at an event. So that's what recruiters do. The importance of diversity and inclusion. So this is a hot topic in recruiting because pretty much every industry, every company out there is really focused on this right now. They want a broad perspective, a broad range of people in their company to make them more successful. So this is something that I would be aware of when you're going into interviews, and really think about what makes me unique. Even if you're not, someone that you would consider yourself to be diverse, there's different ways that you can be diverse and different ways that you can stand up out from the crowd or have a different perspective from other people around you. So really be thinking about this as you go into interviews, and also focus on the importance and be able to talk about the importance of a wide variety of perspectives as it relates to business. You're getting a little bit of that in classes, but that's something that you might get asked in an interview as well. So just for example, Zayo was going to be here today, and she sent me this. Zayo Leadership, so the people at the top, they review diversity hiring metrics on a weekly basis. That's how pertinent this is. Not just to ensure that they're hiring diverse candidates, not just to meet that number, but because they truly believe their organization will be better with those diverse candidates. So this is an important piece of recruiting these days. Okay, typical steps in the recruiting process. We kind of talked about this with interviewing, but basically you would start at the job posting, career fair, or networking event, kind of that first time that you hear about the company or the job. Then you move to a phone or a video screen, then an on-site interview, and that can be multiple interviews. Reference check, then you move to the background check. So your references, as you're interviewing for jobs, I would reach out to them and let them know, hey, I'm interviewing for this position. I'm listing you as a reference. 1, is that okay? 2, here's what the jobs are. Because if that person then gets a call from whatever company it is, they can then be prepared to speak about your strengths as it relates to those types of roles. So it's not just kind of blindsiding them with a phone call. Background checks. So background check and drug tests would come after the reference check. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the offer would come after that. You might get multiple offers. So come talk to us if you're in a situation where you're not really sure what to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit too. Okay, why is every company's timeline different? This depends on many different things. So the company's growth stage, if they are hiring like crazy, their timeline might be like, hey, we got to move quickly. We got to get people in here. We got to train them. We got to get them on the job. Specific team needs and timeline. So recruiters often work for multiple departments or teams within a company. So if one team is really taking all of their time right now and you applied to a different team and you're kind of sitting there waiting for them to get back to you about that position, it might just take longer because this other team is really drawing all their attention right now. The number of steps in the interview process. So if you're applying for an entry-level job, there's probably fewer steps in the interview process versus a senior hire or like even an internship versus entry-level. The hiring team's bandwidth. If they have a really small HR department, if they're like a startup and they barely even have anyone in HR, or if they're a really large company and they're growing really fast, but their HR team hasn't grown and they haven't hired more recruiters yet, that can factor into how quickly they get back to you, how quickly they can do interviews and hire people. So it depends on how much time that hiring team has and how many people there are. And then the candidate response time. This is important. So we talked about timely emails and responding in a timely manner. If they're sitting there waiting for you to respond to them and it takes a few days or even a week for you to get back, that's going to delay the process and even potentially take you out of their process. All right, why do some companies only recruit from certain schools? You might hear that companies have target schools, and DU does or doesn't fall into some of those companies' target schools. So some companies will recruit at certain schools based on their academic programs and the majors offered. If we have a company coming here that really wants someone who majored in kind of operations, that side of things, or supply chain, we don't necessarily have a major in that. We have some classes in it, and we're working towards a certificate in it, but we might not have those majors that they're looking for. So even though we might have some great candidates for them, they really have to figure out where's my time best spent. And so they might not target us for those jobs. Partnership opportunities. So things like you'll start to see advertisements for our corporate partners events. That usually happens February or January sometimes. But basically those are companies that partner with us. They sponsor at Daniels, and so we give them lots of opportunities to come to campus. They specifically want to hire DU and Daniels students, and so that's why they partner with us, because they want to get in front of you guys. So if we give them lots of opportunities and they're putting up with their end of the deal and sponsoring Daniels and sponsoring these events, then that's helpful, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Alumni representation. If we have a lot of DU alums at a company and they're doing really well, chances are that company is going to want to come back here, and chances are those alums in that company are saying, hey, we got to go hire more DU students. Why aren't we on DU's campus more? Because they want to help current students who are from their alma mater. The location. If, let's say, a company's based in Fort Collins, where do you think they're probably recruiting from? CSU, right? So it just kind of depends on ease and location and how all that stuff works out. Not to say that they wouldn't be open to other candidates, but as far as coming to campus or recruiting from specific schools, that plays a factor. Budget restrictions. So I don't know if you guys know, but companies have to pay to come to career fairs. Okay, so if a recruiting team is small or a company's HR department is really small, they might not be able to put as much money towards those career fairs or towards their marketing materials that they bring to career fairs or towards their advertising dollars or paying to post a job somewhere online. They don't have to pay to post with us, but that could be a factor. So they have to really pick and say, okay, if we want to go to 5 career fairs this year nationwide, is DU one of them? Maybe not, maybe it is. So that could be a reason that some companies only recruit from certain schools. The recruiting team's bandwidth, again, if they only have 2 recruiters and there's a career fair here and in like Oregon on the same weekend, they're probably going to have to choose between those 2. History or relationship with the school. This one's important for you guys. So just know that when companies have a really good experience with us and with our students, that's when they come back and they hire more DU students and more DU alums. If, for example, we have a bunch of students, and this is happening over and over again with a certain company, if we have a lot of students who are accepting offers and then going back on those offers and saying, never mind, I found a different job, I'm not going to be coming to work for you anymore, then if that happens over and over again, that company's not going to come back here, because they're going to say, you know what, those DU students, they're not true to their word. They're going to keep going back on their offers with us. So just keep in mind that your actions don't just represent you, but they also represent the rest of DU and Daniels and could potentially impact future Daniels students. Okay, factors to consider if you're considering applying to a posting. I know a lot of you might look at a job or internship posting and say, oh, I'm not qualified, I don't have all of these requirements. There's a difference between preferred and required qualifications. So if you meet 70% of those preferred qualifications, I would go ahead and apply as long as you meet all the required ones. So just take note that that's a slight difference, okay, when you're looking at those job descriptions. Research the typical salary, the location, and the cost of living. So that can play a lot into it. Getting an awesome salary in San Francisco and getting the same salary here means a very different thing. Because if they're paying you as much to live here as they are in San Francisco, your money's going to go a lot further here. That's just an example. But that factors in. So know the cost of living where you're applying. And then the company culture. We've talked about that before, but just make sure you really know what you're getting into when you're applying for a job. Right, how to search for jobs and what to type into those keyword searches on job boards. So make sure that you are researching the industry like we've talked about. Use LinkedIn to find alumni and look at their job titles. So, for example, if you are a marketing student, you could probably go on LinkedIn or go on Pioneer Careers and type in marketing internship and get some results. If you're in management, probably not. International business, probably not. BIA, probably not, because that's just not, management internship just isn't really a thing. Sometimes you might find something called that once in a while, but you're more likely going to find something called finance internship, marketing internship. Not to say that those majors are better, it's just the job titles are not that. So it's really good to do those informational interviews and ask what each company is calling those entry-level positions or their internship positions. Use LinkedIn to find those alums and then look back at their history, their work history. What was their entry-level role? What did they do internships in? What was their title? Because that's going to help you figure out, okay, what can I type in? You can also talk to some seniors on campus, and might be some seniors in here, but talk to upperclassmen who have done internships, who are looking at jobs. Ask them what their title was, so it saves you some time when you're on those job search websites. All right. How should I get a contact at a company to get my foot in the door? Reach out to alumni on LinkedIn or Pioneer Connect. We've talked about that. Do informational interviews. Leverage your relationship with us. One thing I will caution you with this. So we do have contacts at companies, a lot of companies in Denver. Sometimes those companies don't want us to give out their information. So the recruiter might say, you know, I'll post a job with you. I'll come to your career fair. Please don't provide my email to anyone because I don't want to get bombarded with emails. So if you come to me and say, you know, I saw this company at the career fair, how come you can't give me their email? That's why. And we have to respect their privacy. A lot of recruiters will say, yes, please send everyone my way. Anyone can email me, reach out whenever, contact me on LinkedIn. That's cool. I'll talk to your students whenever they want. So then I can actually give out the email. What I'll most frequently do if you're looking for a contact in a company and we have someone in our system but I'm not allowed to give you their email is I'll give you their name and then tell you to reach out on LinkedIn, because then at least you know who it is and you can hopefully still reach out that way. Okay, why do recruiters come to campus? So recruiters are here not just to do hiring every single time. Sometimes they're just trying to build their brand and get in front of you and build relationships with you. So when you are going to these meet and greets or talking to recruiters when they actually come to my class, or going to career fairs, if you talk to a company and they're like, you know, we're not hiring for internships right at the moment, don't just say, okay, never mind, and walk away. If you're interested in that company, start talking with them, provide your resume, stay in touch with them, because part of that recruiting process is building a relationship over time. So when they do have something available and they are on campus and they do have something that they can hire you for, they remember you. Okay, so it's not always just transactional. Sometimes it's about building that process, building that relationship over time. They're building that pipeline for the future. That's what that bullet point means. So another thing to mention, recruiters are always networking with one another. You know, they are at events together all the time for different companies. They're talking to one another. They're friends. Sometimes they switch companies, and then they meet more recruiters. So just know, and this doesn't happen all the time, but if you start to build a reputation for yourself, that could potentially travel within that recruiter network. So, for example, if you're interviewing for a job and the candidate or the interviewer reaches back out and they're like, hey, we want to offer you this position. When can you start? And you decide, I don't want to interview with them anymore. I don't really like that job. I'm just not going to respond. That's not good, okay? Then your name will be that person who just ghosted them. And I know that that's a thing that they talk about in recruiting, is being ghosted by candidates. So just know that can happen, and not that recruiters are gossiping constantly, but if you're doing it over and over again and you're doing it within a similar industry, it's a potential to happen. Okay, so I know, have most of you guys gone to a career fair? Raise your hand if you've gone to one. Okay, so most of you have gone. I won't go into detail too much on this. So one thing I want to note, always follow up with a personalized thank you after a career fair. If you have that person's email, send them a thank you for taking the time to talk to you, or connect with them on LinkedIn. Remind them of who you were and what you talked about and what you were interested in, especially if it's a company you really want to work for. If you talk to someone and you're like, I'm not so interested in that company anymore, don't worry about it. But if it's someone you're trying to pursue and you really want to work there, or you're going to apply, this will make you stand out. Okay, and it means a lot. Even just a quick email, quick note will make you stand out from the pack. Okay. Respond in a timely manner. We've talked about that before. Be honest and transparent about what you're looking for, and keep the recruiter updated on your timeline. So this one's kind of a gray area, because I would say don't feel like you have to tell them every single thing about everything you're interviewing for. It's a candidate's market out there, so recruiters are kind of competing for talent right now. That could easily change very quickly in the next couple years. I want you to just be prepared for that. But right now, it's a candidate's market. So when a recruiter says, okay, where else are you interviewing? They're trying to get an idea of how competitive they actually are compared to those other companies that you're looking at. So one way to handle that is you can say, I'm looking at a couple of other similar internships. I'm in the interview process. You don't have to give like the title and the company and all of that kind of stuff if you don't want to. One thing I would be honest about is keeping them in the loop about how interested you actually are in the job. If you're not interested, send them an email and just say, I don't think this is the right fit for me at the moment. Thank you for your time. Because then you're not kind of leading them on and ending up they give you an offer and you're like, I wasn't ever actually that interested. I was just kind of doing it for something to do and to get practice. Because then they have to go back and find someone else and go through the whole process again. So, and that's where that bad reputation can start and all of that kind of stuff. So just be honest with them. And if you're getting multiple offers, or if you have one offer and it's not at your first choice company, but you're like, do I take it just to have something, or do I wait for this other company? You do have the option, if you're already starting to interview with that dream company, to reach out to them and say, hey, I have this other offer, but you're my first choice. Can you let me know about the hiring process timeline at this point? Because then they can maybe speed it up. Maybe you get that first choice if they speed up the process. So if you're in that situation, come talk to us, because every situation is going to be different when it comes to those offers and what to do in those different situations. Okay, one final thing, and then I will let you guys go back out into the snow. Be aware of drug testing policies. Just because we're in Colorado does not mean that companies won't drug test. I've had a lot of students get to the point in an interview where they're doing that background check drug testing process, and they don't get the job because they don't pass it. Especially if you're looking at anything federal, any companies that aren't based here, anything with like an airline, or some companies just do it because they don't want to be liable for different things. So just please know that. Look at the timelines, do some research. You can ask if they do drug testing, but I just don't want any of you to be in that situation that I've seen students struggle with before. So, but yeah, any questions about anything that I went through? I know that this is kind of a messy topic sometimes and kind of an unfamiliar topic. Okay, so this was our last class session. We do have drop-ins next week. If you're having trouble with anything, please come in and see us. I'll send an email with locations on that. Make sure you sign out. And then if you are interested in the Job Shadow program, contact Angie. Have a great rest of your quarter. Stay warm out there.